Hello and welcome to lesson number 7 of the new syllabus and lesson number 5 of the old syllabus of drafting, pleadings and appearances. In this lesson, we will effectively cover the concept of assignment deeds and in particular the assignment of business debt, assignment of intellectual property, also assignment of insurance policies we will look into, and then finally we will conclude it with the concept of partnership deeds and trust deeds. Let's start now. So before I go forward and discuss the concepts, I need to discuss two important topics. One, the meaning of assignment, and next, the meaning of actionable claim. We had a fair bit of discussion on the concept of sale deed in our previous topic, in our previous lesson, correct? So I always compare the concept of assignment with the concept of sale deed. The reason is, in a sale deed for an immovable property, the rights and interest over such immovable property and also the title of such immovable property shall stand transferred completely. It is conveyed, correct? So similarly, when it comes to intangibles, the word we use is not sale but assignment, correct? So an absolute transfer of rights and liabilities would be something termed as an assignment. However, it is not for a tangible, that is property which can be touched and felt. It is for a property which cannot be seen, which is an intangible. So what are these intangibles? Intellectual property is an intangible, goodwill is an intangible, correct? So that is the reason why this assignment is like predominantly consisting of those topics which are intangible. So assignments is for the intangible, sale deed is for a tangible, correct? So for an intangible it becomes more complex, because for a tangible object, at least you know, fine, there is a object like, I mean, or there is a particular immovable property or a movable property, and I hold a particular ownership over it and I transfer it to you. So you can actually prove the possession, you can actually prove that I'm enjoying the rights over this particular property. I'm in possession of it. But when it comes to an intangible property, showing possession actually is difficult. Hence, the documentation part has to be pretty strong, correct? So that is what we will be learning in this lesson. So having understood the concept of assignment, so let me introduce you the concept of an actionable claim. So what is an actionable claim? The Transfer of Property Act under Section 3 defines an actionable claim under two brackets. First, a claim to unsecured debt. So your secured debt, right, secured by mortgage or by pledge, these do not come under actionable claims, correct? So first, it is a claim to an unsecured debt. And second, it is a claim to any beneficial interest in a movable property which is not in the possession of the person who is having that claim. So what are these two aspects? What am I trying to convey here? Why are we even talking about actionable claims, right? So for that, let me give you an example. Assume A has given a loan of 100 rupees. For the simplicity, I'm keeping it the figure simple, to B. So A has given a loan of 100 rupees to B. Now, what does A have? A has a right, right? What does it has? I mean, what does A have? A has a right to recover this money from B, and that right is nothing but the claim. And assuming it has no security, it is a claim to unsecured debt, and hence this is an actionable claim. That is a claim on which an action can be taken. Can you sue if it doesn't pay you back? Yes, correct. Similarly, you can even transfer this actionable claim, and that is what is assignment of an actionable claim. Now, let us say A has to pay 150 rupees to C. So instead of paying 100 rupees, what A does is A pays 50 rupees in cash to C, plus for 100 rupees it enters into an assignment of the actionable claim. A tells C that please recover this 100 from B. So A is in effect assigning the actionable claim to C. So this is what is the concept of assignment of actionable claims. And what are the conditions for that? First, it may be with or without consideration. Fine. Second, it shall be in writing, agreed, and signed by the transferor or his agent, agreed. And third, and the very most important point under section 131 of the Transfer of Property Act, a notice of transfer shall be given. That is, A should have given a notice to B saying that I am transferring this actionable claim to C, and hence from tomorrow all the payments you need to pay me shall now stand transferred to C. Only then this transfer will become effective, failing which this transfer shall not be treated as a legal transfer and it cannot be a legal assignment, and B will not be bound to make any payments to C. And hence it is very important on part of the C to ensure that A issues a notice to be intimating that the actionable claims shall stand transferred to C. Right. So when in the subsequent slide, I will discuss the concept of assignment of business debt. Then I'll acquaint you with how practically this thing plays a very crucial role in the financial market in India. Let's move forward. Assignment of business debt. So taking the same example forward, AB. So over there, we said that actionable claim is by default a claim to an unsecured debt. However, in the financial market, even your business debt which is secured can also be assigned. However, that does not come under the definition of as an actionable claim. So actionable claim is entirely different. So it does not come under that. But effectively, that is what happens. So same example. Now let me take it in the form of a company. ABC Limited is there. SBI has given a loan of 100 crore to ABC Limited. Now SBI wants to get early realization of this money. So what SBI does, SBI effectively sells this loan to some companies which are actually called as asset reconstruction companies. Assume this ABC is failing to make payments to SBI. So now there is a principal recovery of 100 crores which is pending plus interest of, let us say, some 15-16 crores. So what ARC does is it buys away this loan account at 25 crore. At very deep discounts, it buys away the loan accounts, and this SBI will then assign the debt, assign this loan account to an ARC. So this is an assignment of, again, a claim. Okay, so this is assignment of a claim. However, it is not an actionable claim. Okay, because it is assuming this to be a secured loan. But over here, if you observe, the assignment has been made by the lender. So ARC will step into the shoes of the lender and recover from ABC Limited. Now we are talking about assignment of business debt. So for ABC, 100 crores is the business debt. What if ABC is assigning it to someone else, some third party from which SBI shall now recover? So that is what is assignment of business debt. And how does that happen? Let me explain you. So I have explained you the concept of asset reconstruction companies. They basically buy away loan accounts from the banks. So do not get confused. ARCs never buy the obligations from the companies. They actually buy it from the bank. So that is the role of ARCs. Now coming to business transfers. So what happens in these two examples I can give you. So business transfer, let us say A Limited has 3 businesses. One is rubber manufacturing, one is sugarcane, they produce sugar, and the third being packaged bottles manufacturing. So now let us say it thought, this is something which is not fitting in its business pipeline. It had to spend a lot of money for training its employees or for gathering the raw material or whatever be the reasons. So it wants to hive off. So you know what is hive off? Hive off is as good is similar to demerger. So you want to demerge it and sell it off, so like get it into a separate entity and then sell it off as a separate entity. That is one option. So that comes under the ambit of scheme of amalgamation, scheme of arrangement. However, instead of that, there is another option which we can suggest, which is business transfer. So what happens in a business transfer, instead of you forming a new entity and then selling away that entity, there would be another existing entity which is interested to enter into sugar industry, and hence what it takes is A Limited and B Limited enter into a business transfer agreement wherein A Limited agrees, or rather transfers, all the business assets and liabilities pertaining to sugar industry. Now assume A Limited has taken a loan of 15 crore from SBI for the purpose of setting up of the factory wherein they will extract sugar from the sugarcane. So now this loan of 15 crore obtained by A Limited and the debt per se shall also get transferred to B Limited because of the business transfer. So along with the business transfer, even the business debt will be assigned. This is one. Next in M&A. So in case of any standard M&A, let us say now entire A Limited will now be merged into B Limited or amalgamated for whatever be the structure. Effectively, A Limited's assets and liabilities also get transferred, and under the liabilities we have something called as business debt, and even the business debt shall stand transferred, right? So in case of an M&A or a business transfer, there is no need of a separate assignment deed which shall be effective. So in case of M&A, at least I can say that you need not have a separate assignment deed, because the court order approving the merger and amalgamation itself will be sufficient to affect a transfer of business debt. Whereas when it comes to business transfers, since it is a voluntary agreement without the intervention of any court, in such cases, in case of business transfer, you need to obtain individual assignment of business debts from the respective banks. So that is where the craftsmanship will be involved, wherein we will draft an assignment of business debt, wherein we will mention, or rather refer. So first, few tips to draft such things. First, refer to the agreement, the principal agreement wherein the business is getting transferred. Subsequently, refer to the consequences of this transfer, that all the assets and liabilities get transferred, and hence even the one of the liabilities include this business debt. This business debt also shall stand transferred. So it will be a tripartite agreement. So firstly, A Limited transfers to B Limited, and also the bank will be a signing party because giving its approval for such transfer. So that is how we affect, a business debt is effectively assigned. See? Fine. Let's move forward. Insurance policies. So there are two wide insurances available. One is to the life and other to goods. So an insurance to life will be paid at the end, as and when the person dies, whereas when it comes to the goods, it is to indemnify the assured against the loss to the goods. Correct? So that is what are the two types of insurances we have. So one important thing you should keep in mind in terms of assignment of insurance policy. Again, here it is an assignment because what is an insurance? It is intangible, man. It is intangible, so you cannot actually touch it. Correct. So an insurance policy is also coming under the ambit of assignment. So can you assign an insurance policy? You have taken an insurance policy based on your health conditions. Can you assign that? That is the question. Second, even if I'm assigning, what is it that I'm assigning? And I personally believe that the second question is most important for someone to ask oneself. So what is capable of assignment? The insurable interest is something which is a right capable of assignment. Do you have an insurable interest? Yes, then yes, you can transfer it. For example, let us say there is a shop, okay, and it sells toys. It's a big famous toy store. Now the fire insurance has already been obtained. Correct? Now the entire store has been transferred to B Limited. Let us say this is A Limited. Now, along with the store, even the insurance policy will be assigned to B Limited, even if B Limited was not having insurable interest at the time of entering into the insurance policy. However, now, second example, this A Limited is still having this toy shop on its own name, and there was no transfer of the toy shop. However, the insurance policy per se has been assigned to B Limited. Now, as and when a fire has taken place to the A Limited's premises, the toys have been damaged. Now, who should actually go and apply for an insurance? In fact, A should apply. But now that the insurance policy has been transferred in the name of B, now B will go and apply. But now the question arises, does B have insurable interest on that particular property, the subject matter? The answer is no. The reason is, even if there is a loss of toys here, or I mean loss of if there's a fire and because of which the property has been damaged, what loss does it cause to be limited? Nil. And hence an insurance shall not be granted in such cases, and no assurance shall be given to be limited. So what is very important is the insurable interest. Always ensure that an insurable interest also is something which has a right capable of assignment, and where you have no insurable interest in the subject matter, you cannot assign the same. So now again, taking this example forward, or giving another view of this example, let us say the entire toy shop has been transferred to B Limited, but there was no assignment being made. Now this is another way of looking at the same example. A Limited has transferred the entire toy shop to B, but the fire insurance has still been in the name of A Limited. Now a fire arose, the entire toys got destroyed. A Limited goes to file for it. Can A Limited get any money or any protection out of that? The answer is again no, and the reason is A Limited does not have any insurable interest in the property. The insurable interest has been assigned to B Limited. So where an insurable interest has itself been assigned, where is the concept of you still trying to claim insurable interest over that property, and we're still trying to claim insurance over the same? And hence, where an insurable interest has been transferred, even the insurance policy should be transferred, only then the other person shall gain something out of it. So this is the concept of an assignment of insurance policy. And usually the life insurance policies are so specific, it is specific to an individual. So transferring such life insurance policy is something which is not possible except with the prior approval of the insurance policy giver. But practically it is not feasible, because every person has got its own individual health status, and hence assigning it makes no sense. Now let us talk about the assignment of intellectual properties. So you do not get fooled by thinking that intellectual property rights so complex, how do we remember the assignments and all? Nothing. It's a simple deed. See, basically what should happen in an assignment? What should happen is the person who has got the rights over a particular property, and in this case, since it is an intangible, its assignment is an intangible. So where is an intangible? You have certain rights, you are transferring the rights. So ensure that your document is covering the same. Firstly, establish who has got the rights. Number one. Second, establish the desire to transfer the rights. Number three, give a proper clause as to the saying that the rights have now been transferred from whom to whom. And number four, at what consideration has it been transferred? And number five would be all other conditions which you think which you should bound both the parties by. So that is how you will draft a deed of assignment. Now, quickly going through the assignment of patent. So what is a patent? It is a set of exclusive rights. So say you have got an invention but you don't, you have spent a lot of money, time, effort, intellectual, your own intellect, and along with the team, you have invented something. Do you wish others to simply copy from it? The answer would 90 out of 100 would be no. In fact, 99 out of 100 would be no. You want it to be protected, and also for you to motivate, for the government to motivate you to come out with more inventions, or rather to motivate others also to come out with inventions. What should it do? It should protect your inventions. It should say that you have got the monopoly to work on these inventions for the rest 20 years. That is what is the concept of a patent. It's an exclusive set of rights. You will get an exclusive right. So as a patent is an exclusive right. Okay? Now, let's move forward. There are two sections which I would like to quote. Section 70, which is the enabling section, which gives the power to the persons registered as grantee or proprietor of a patent. So the patent's proprietor, or rather the grantee, the one on whose name patent has been registered in the register, he has got the power to assign, to grant licenses, or to deal with the patent, to give effectual receipts for any consideration of such assignment, license, or dealing. So you can assign the patent. The power has been provided under section 70. And what does section 68 say? Section 68 says that an assignment of a patent or a share in a patent or whatever shall not be heard unless the same were in writing and the consent is reduced in the form of a document embodying all terms and conditions governing their rights and obligations and duly executed. So it effectively says that such assignment shall be by way of a written document, and hence an assignment of patent shall be purely by way of an assignment deed which shall be written, and it shall effectively uh, register all the terms and conditions subject to which this assignment shall be valid. And what are generally those? I mean, that's the same, the essential features: writing, signed by parties, and it shall make an application to the controller of patents for registration. Yeah, post assignment, the same document shall be filed to the controller of patents, subsequent to which your name shall be entered in the register as an effective owner. So this is what is the transfer assignment of a patent. And what are the effective terms? Royalty is the very important term which your assignment deed shall cover. What is the royalty you're paying for this assignment? Total royalty would be something which upon the use, and consideration is one-time consideration which you would have paid, and usage restrictions may be territory wise. You are restricted, you can use it only in this particular territory of India. You cannot assign, you cannot do further assignments. No sub delegations can be restricted, and so on and so forth. You can have various conditions, but these are certain major conditions which shall be present in an assignment deed of patents. Let's move forward. Assignment of trademark. So what is a trademark? Dell, the laptop Dell, this Dell, it's a trademark. Apple, for mobile phones, it's a trademark. iPhone itself is a trademark. So what are these? These are the marks which represent the businesses. So these marks represent the business behind it, the product behind it, the reputation behind it, the quality of the products behind it. Oh, hence is the importance of a trademark. And now let us say I want to acquire the trademark. Don't I? Yeah, of course I want to acquire the trademark, because that gives me an initial push to immediately get a grasp of how I can run businesses. For example, Tatas have acquired Jaguar and Land Rover. The entire trademarks has been, of course, the business per se, the fact is everything have been assigned, but more importantly, the trademarks have been assigned. And what is it that, what does it mean by, why am I stressing on the importance of the trademark here? Because that gives the difference, that gives the edge. So now you are in the luxurious market, you are the leader brand of the particular luxurious car manufacturers, and hence that's what did you see Tata's changing the name of Jaguar and Land Rover to any of the domestic names of Tata? The answer is no. Even though they own the property, even though they own the business, they have no intention to change the name, for the simple reason that it is a name, it's a brand which is making the money, and hence is the importance of a trademark, and hence is also the importance of an assignment of a trademark. Correct. So now coming to the assignment of it, similar to the Patents Act, even here section 37 is the enabling section which gives the power to assign, and uh, again it shall be in writing, shall be signed by both the assigner and assignee, and it shall make an application to the trademark registrar in this case. And coming back to the assignment deed, again I stress the same, clearly specify, since they are assigned, assignment the trademarks in this case would be something which are registered trademarks, and such registered trademarks, there every trademark will have a trademark number. So whenever you're assigning a trademark, you should be very clear quoting the trademark name. If there is any logo, if there's any shape or something of the logo, then the shape and the image of it, and then the entire description of the trademark and the trademark number. So these are the following trademarks which get assigned and get it signed by the proprietor of such trademarks. Whosoever be the proprietor of the trademark, so same proprietor shall sign on the assignment deed, giving an acknowledgement that monies have been received and that a trademark shall now stand transferred. So that is the concept of assignment of a trademark. Right. So along with that, what is the consideration you're paying for the assignment, and can the same trademark be, is it restricted to any territory, or across the globe you can use a trademark and you can be the owner of such trademark? So like that, there would be various things you would look into for the purpose of assignment. Right. So this is the concept of assignment of trademarks. And now one other important aspect under section 39 is that in case of an unregistered trademark, so when it comes to unregistered, so I said that any assignment of trademark can be only for the registered trademarks. But when it comes to unregistered trademarks, an unregistered trademark per se cannot be assigned under the Trademarks Act. It can only be assigned along with the goodwill of the company. So we will, in subsequent slides, we will look into the assignment of goodwill. It's again a very small concept. So whenever in case of M&A, we just had a brief discussion on M&A. In case of M&A, along with everything, we also transfer something called as goodwill. A company would have earned goodwill out of its business throughout some period of time. Goodwill with the suppliers, goodwill with the customers, goodwill with the regulators. So even that stands transferred automatically. Correct? So now, in case of an unregistered trademark, a trademark which is not registered under the Trademarks Act. So because the reason is a trademark need not necessarily be registered. There is no mandatory rule that you have to register your trademarks. And for that reason, you still might have you were using certain trademarks in years, but the trademark is still pending registration. So in such cases and such trademarks, you cannot have a separate assignment deed and a person to which you can assign it. It can be assigned only by way of assignment along with your goodwill only. So any other document, even if you enter, that will not have any protection under the Trademarks Act. So that is what they meant to say. Right? Now finally, the copyrights. So copyrights, the best example of a copyright is a movie, book. In books, you have the author has got the copyrights. In movies, the director or the producer, as the case maybe, will have the copyrights. So it depends who, it's any kind of an artistic work where a copyright shall be granted. So here the Copyrights Act 57 section 18 of the act gives the right to the owner to assign the copyright, and such copyright can be assigned either wholly or partially, generally or subject to limitations, or for the whole term or any part thereof. In case of a copyright, it is very interesting. I'll give you an example with a movie. Let us take the example of the famous Bahubali. Bahubali is originally made in Telugu, correct? So the producers are originally from Andhra Pradesh. But what happened later? Who gets the rights of Bahubali in Hindi? Karan Johar, correct? So first it is made in Telugu. Then there are several players in Malayalam, Telugu, Tamil, Hindi. These are the major languages in which it has been released. So in Malayalam, there's a separate producers, Tamil and Hindi. Producer in the sense the release, so the rights to release it in that particular state. So this person who has actually produced Bahubali has got the rights across India, and he can dictate. So he can assign such rights partially for the state of Telugu to one part. To himself, he'll put it for himself. For state of Malayalam, he keeps to one. For the Tamil, one producer. For Hindi, one producer will buy such rights from this producer. And it doesn't just end there. Along with it, now comes the distribution. Same producer, since he has retained the rights for Telugu, now under the Telugu, that is both the states of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, he has got every right to distribute this to various distributors. So film distributors, who further distribute it to the theaters. So there again you have certain business. So that is one. Second is your digital rights, Amazon Prime, Netflix, those digital rights. Third, television. On the television, broadcasting it on the television, that is one other right you have. Fourth, animated series. So they did an animation of it on Prime. So for that you have. Fifth, story depiction. So depicting on this particular story, they have started a certain series on Netflix, which is supposed to be aired and not yet aired. So that is one other right which you give. So even though it is not the same story, it is a development of the story, but still that has come from the family of Bahubali, and hence it still belongs to the producer himself. And along with it, you have the music, rights to the music. You can also own the rights to the music, which you again further give it to channels like Saavn, Amazon Prime, Spotify, Prime Music, Spotify, etc., Gaana, etc., and so on. If you see, for one single movie, you have got a hell lot of rights which a producer handles, and all this bundle of rights are something called as copyrights. And you can choose these assignments. Whom should I give? Similarly, if you take a book, a translation of it, you can decide to whom should it go. Territory wise, in India, you would be the distributor. In rest of the India, I would be the distributor. It's just endless. The business of copyrights is quite amazing, and that's the very reason why they actually have the concept. They have a very they realize the significance of the assignment of a copyright. Coming to the features of it, the same. It has to be in writing, signed by the parties, and an application shall be made for registering in the title. And uh, as I said earlier, you should very importantly remember as to what is the term you want to register this for, what is the territory up to which this shall be spread, and along with the territory and the term, you should also restrict yourself in terms of what are the other rights they can enjoy, or what are the rights which they cannot enjoy, what are the exclusive rights they get, what are the rights they don't get. It has to be clearly specified in the assignment deed. And these 2 points also stand a lot of relevance. If the period has not been specified in the assignment, it shall be deemed to be 5 years, and where a territorial extent is not stipulated, it shall be deemed only to be extended or applicable in the whole of India. Correct? So these two are the deeming provisions in case your assignment deed is silent. So very important. The term and the territory are two important clauses in a assignment of a copyright. So assignment deed of copyrights. And if you fail to mention it, the act deems certain aspects. Right? So this is the concept of assignment of copyright. So with this, we have finished the assignment of intellectual property rights. Now let us quickly go through the assignment of goodwill and business. Assignment of good business and goodwill. So here again, we have actually briefly discussed this in terms of business transfers, where goodwill is being, business is transferred, and along with the business, you also have something called as a goodwill, which is, as I said earlier, which you have with your bankers, with your suppliers, customers, regulators. So such goodwill is built over a period of time because of the carrying of the business of the company, and such advantage it shall also be commonly transferred as part of the transfer of the entire business. So where a business has been assigned, the business transfer has been made, even the goodwill will be assigned automatically. And such business goodwill will also acquire the trademarks, patents, copyrights of the business, as well as the benefits of the contracts. So say this business has got a lot of contacts through which you source materials, everything, this also gets transferred. So that is also by way of a goodwill, it also shall get transferred. And all the reputation, your connections, organization, or any other exceptional features of the business also shall get transferred. So this is the concept of assignment of business goodwill. And usually I don't see any need of a separate agreement for assignment of goodwill. Wherever a business is being transferred, there would be a single clause which also says the entire assets and liabilities along with the goodwill also shall get transferred. Right? So this is an adequate discussion on assignment deed and various branches of assignment. Now let us look into the partnership deeds and trust deed. So partnership deed, as I told, always you have to look into firstly which act governs it. So keep this in mind every single time I say this. Which is the act which governs this is something you should ask yourself. So the Indian Partnership Act 1932 governs the partnership deeds. This, I would do a very quick summary of the partnership deeds, because this we have seen as a under the mercantile laws, even in our CS Foundation or for CS students in the CPT, any mercantile law we would have seen this. So the conceptually is still the same. I would give you some tips as to how you draft certain things. So firstly, it is the concept of a mutual agency. That is, it is carried on it's basically a relation. So again, this is very important. Remember, it's a relation between persons, and they have just have agreed to share profits, and such business has been carried on by all, or any of them acting for all. So either all of them carry it, or any of them acting for all. So it's a mutual agency. I would be an agent of the other partner. The other partner is deemed to be an agent of mine. It's a mutual agency concept, which is a partnership. And what are the essential elements? First, in order to enter into a partnership, you need a deed. So it has to be an agreement entered into by all the partners. And the agreement should cover the concept that they distribute the profits. And there has to be an existence of mutual agency. So now, this agreement which you enter the partnership deed shall be signed by all the partners. You have to give the description of all the partners, and I have to explain what is the nature of business. So the deed should contain that all the three have wanted to enter into a business, and hence this agreement. And in the agreement, you have to cover the concept of what is the nature of the business, and what is the capital which the partners are contributing, what is the profit sharing ratio they want, how do they want to operate the bank accounts, how do they want to look into the accounting of their expenses, and who has got to decide where to invest the money. How do they decide it? Is it by way of mutual consent, all the people consenting, or one partner also can sign on behalf of everyone? Investments, where do they invest such funds? And expenses, as I told earlier. So all these aspects will club together, will form part of your partnership deed, correct? Now, in case a body corporate wants to become a partner, usually partnerships firm is only between two living persons, but in even a company, a corporate person can still enter into a partnership firm, into a partnership. However, subject to condition that its articles empower such partnership firm to enter into partnership. So that has to be looked into. Now, introduction of a new partner. So remember that as and when a new partner enters into a firm, let us say A and B have started a partnership firm, AB and Co. Now C also wants to come. The moment C comes, what happens? So what is a partnership? Again, it's a relation between two persons, two or more persons. So firstly, there was a relation between A and B which is captured by AB and Co. Now, with the introduction of a new partner, what happens? This relationship breaks because now the relationship is between A, B and C. The earlier relation was between A and B, and hence the partnership per se has been dissolved. A new partnership is being formed. The firm is not dissolved. Always remember, firm is different from partnership. Partnership is between the partners. So earlier it was between A and B under the same firm A, B and Co. Now the partnership is between A, B and C, but the firm is still the same A, B and Co. So here what I want to say is differentiate the partnership from the firm, correct? Now, and usually this introduction shall be subject to all the persons. So introduction of a new partner shall be subject to the consent of all the partners of the firm. And whatever are the acts done before the joining of this new partner, the new partner shall not be made liable for such acts. So that is what is the concept of introduction of a new partner. Now, retirement and expulsion of a partner. Usually a partner can be retired if all the other partners consent to it. So firstly, with the consent of all the partners, suppose A, B and C has started AB and Co. Now AB wants C to exit, then that is one. So where the consent of all the partners have been given, or where it is self. Suppose C wants to retire, then usually a notice shall be given. If the the agreement will provide for issuing of a notice to all the partners saying that I would like to retire. So no one can mandate you to stay. You can retire on your own. So that is something which can happen. And in order for expulsion of a partner, usually expulsion powers will not be given in a agreement because at times maybe few partners can tie up and throw you out of the firm. But however, in case of a good faith, by exercising a good faith, you as a partner, uh, I mean, a majority of the partners can resolve to expel one of the partners. However, the agreement shall provide for that. So your partnership deed, which is binding every contractual relationship between you two or you three, shall provide for a right for the majority of the partners to expel the other partner. So that is what is the concept of expulsion. And coming to nomination, so nomination is an interesting thing. Of course, every person nominates as to who would succeed, nomination of a successor who would succeed. So that is something which is allowed even under the code. However, let us say there are only two, as we said earlier, A and B. Where there are only two partners, it is not possible for one of the partners to nominate a successor. Why? Because the death of B causes the partnership to dissolve and even the partnership firm to dissolve. How? As I said, firm is different from partnership. And in case of a partnership, it is the relationship between the partners, A and B. Now, at the time of death of B, this relationship is gone. But the firm should still prevail, correct? Yes. However, in case of a firm will be in existence only if the relationship between all the partners in the firm is still prevalent. At least between the last two of them, at least one relationship should be standard. So here there is no more relationship which is valid, and hence even the firm is deemed to have been dissolved. Correct? Try to understand, try to dig deep. The word relation plays a very crucial role. A partnership is a relation between these partners, whereas the firm is the relationship between all the partners. So where one relationship is gone, also the partnership firm should still be in existence. However, where all the relationships are gone, then the firm also is gone. So in such a case, it is difficult. However, in one case, which is the Commissioner of Income Tax versus Govindram Sugar Mills, which is an AR 1966 case. So what happened in this case? The court held that the nomination of a partner, of a successor of a partner, in case of a firm consisting of only two partners, shall not stand valid, as the firm also shall stand dissolved on the death of the partner. Correct? Hence, this is one case which justifies our argument in this manner. So a nomination is possible, however, where there are only two partners, it is not possible. Now, purchase of business by a partner. So wherever a partnership ceases to exist, the partnership business is usually closed. And whenever the partnership business is closed, all the assets and liabilities will be valued. And what happens after the valuation? Every partner shall be entitled, as against every other partner, to have the firm applied in payment of the debts and to have the surplus distributed according to their rights. So, where a business has been done with, then firstly all the assets are valued, liabilities are valued. The once the assets are valued accordingly or from that, and also as per the capital contribution or as per the profit bearing of the partners, the amount shall be made payable to the liabilities, and any surplus left shall stand distributed to all other partners. But what if one of the partners wants to buy away that business? He can do so by taking all the liabilities on his own and making the payments, and then giving away respective share of the partners to them, or rather by giving away consideration to the partners to sell away their share to you. Even that way you can buy the business from the partners. So this is the concept. These are the four important concepts in a partnership firm in case of partnership deed. And next we have registration. A registration of a partnership deed is completely optional under the Partnership Act. And when it comes to the Income Tax Act, every year you have to register with the Income Tax Commissioner, rather I mean the Income Tax Department. It is not the registration as required, under the deed and all, but since you are an SSC, you have to every year file all the required documents with the Income Tax Department. So this is the concept. Now let us look into the concept, the final concept of dissolution of a partnership deed, which I was keeping on repeating, which is very important. So dissolution of a firm. So there are two important aspects, which are dissolution of firm and the other is dissolution of partnership. Differentiate. Firm is different from a partnership. Partnership is between partners. Firm is which represents the partnership of all partners. So this partnership of all partners is what is a firm. So whoever are the existing or rather I can say all existing partners. Now taking an example of a firm where there are four parties for a better understanding. So there is a relationship between all, correct? Let us say D died. Now what happened? The partnership has been dissolved because earlier the partnership was between A, B, C and D, and this partnership is dissolved because there is no more D. Now a new partnership has been formed between whom? A, B and C. But did the firm dissolve? No, because there is still partnership existing between the existing partners. Now let us say C also died, D also died. I mean B also died. Now, did the partnership dissolve? Yes. Now, is there any partnership of existing partners left? No, because there's only one single partner and hence there is no such partnership or the relationship which is left, and hence it amounts to a dissolution of a firm. So the meaning by, I mean what we mean to say here is the Partnership Act defines dissolution of firm as the end of the relationship of all the partnerships between all the partners. So that is what is a dissolution of a firm. And such dissolution can be either with the intervention of the court or without the intervention of the court. And without the intervention of the court, it can be compulsory or it can be voluntary. So it can be voluntary by way of consent of all the partners by way of an agreement, or it can be compulsory in case it will be compulsory if all but one, that is except for one, everyone else has been adjudged to be an insolvent. So you have gone insolvent, so no more a partnership firm, or where the purpose has turned unlawful, or the term for which the partnership has been established is expired, or the purpose for which the partnership has been established has been accomplished. So in these cases, the firm shall be dissolved. But with the intervention of the court, let us see the interesting clauses. First, the partners have turned into an unsound mind, where it is incapable to perform the duties as a partner anymore, and they are guilty of conduct in such a way that the running of the business has become impossible, or it might become unlawful because of their conduct. And where partner, like other partners, are actually or willfully or persistently committing the breach of agreements every now and then, because of which it has become impossible for the business to run, then one of the partners may go and file. So usually it is with the intervention of court. Who wants the intervention of the court? In one of the partners. So one of the partner wants the intervention of the court and says that, see, this is what these people are doing. I don't want this firm to be anymore. Dissolve it. Right? Next, where the person transferred the whole of his interest to a third party. So where this partner with whom I'm running the business has transferred his interest to a third party, so I don't want to be continue this anymore. So that also may be taken as a ground for the intervention of the court. And where this firm's business can be carried on save at a loss, which means I can do the business but only by incurring losses. There is no point that I would gain any money out of it, and hence I don't want this firm. Please order for dissolution of the firm. Even though other partners are agreeing, you can still convince the court, and by intervention of the court can order for a dissolution of the firm, and on any other just and equitable grounds, which can be any, for that matter, any ground. So this is how you can dissolve a firm, either with the intervention of the court or without the intervention of the court. So this is the concept of a dissolution of a firm. So before I conclude a partnership deed, the concept of partnership deed, I would again repeat the basic points which you need to remember when you're drafting a partnership deed, because the entire aspect will come under the concept of partnership deed only. So firstly, you have to describe partners, their willingness to enter into partnership, which is a relationship, their capital contribution, their profit sharing, their bank account operations, authorization, who is authorized for any operations of business, how do they operate the business, correct? And any introduction of a new partner, how does it happen, or retirement or expulsion, right to nominate. In case of profit sharing also, you will also talk about the loss sharing. How do you distribute the losses, correct? And dispute resolution, how do we go for dispute resolution? Jurisdiction, to which courts do you go for the jurisdiction? So all these aspects come under the ambit of a partnership deed, right? So with this, we finish the discussion on partnership deeds. Let us go further and have a final discussion on trust deeds. So trust deeds. Again, the first question, what is the act which governs it? The act which governs a trust deed is the Indian Trusts Act 1882. And what does it have? How is it defined? So it's a very interesting definition. Section 3 of the Act defines a trust as it's an obligation annexed to the ownership of property. So there is a property and there is an ownership, and this trust is an obligation annexed to the ownership of the property, and which is arising out of a confidence reposed in and accepted by the owner. The owner of the property has reposed in particular confidence. It has been arising out of such confidence, either accepted by the owner or declared and accepted by him for the benefit of another or of another and the owner. So it is also for the benefit of someone, correct? So what are the various things which we are looking at here? So firstly, we are looking at the term called obligation annexed to the ownership of a property, and this property is called as trust property, correct? And it is arising out of a confidence reposed in and accepted by the owner. So the owner of the property has reposed in certain confidence, and that confidence is either given to a person or kept with himself. And why is it given? It is either for the benefit of another or of another and the owner. So I may be giving it for the benefit of some third random party without any relevance to me, or along with me to someone else. That is what is the concept of a trust. So here let me introduce you to some very important aspects, and before that, this is also very important. The trust, the object shall always be lawful. And what are the important topics I wish to tell you, which is author of the trust and trustee. So how does this, how will be a trust formed? A trust is formed by way of executing a trust deed. Correct? A trust is formed by way of executing a trust deed. So what should a trust deed contain and what happens in the case of a trust deed? So let me put you this way. Firstly, there is an author of a trust. Take an example. A person A has got lot of property, cash, jewelry, whatever. Now he wants to just give it off to the public. So he thinks, let me form a trust, and through trust I will do certain charity. So what does he do? Firstly, A here in this case will become the author of the trust because he is the one who is creating the trust. So we call the term as creation of trust, and hence the person who is creating it will be the author of the trust. So the author of the trust creates the trust, and once the trust is created, the property of the author, which is the trust property, shall be transferred to the trust. But is there a trust? No. So trust cannot be, you cannot term the trust as a separate entity. That is one big trouble. A trust per se shall be handled by a person who is called as a trustee. So trustee is the one who manages the entire affairs of the trust, and he is the one in whom the confidence has been reposed in. So he is the one in whom the confidence has been reposed, and he is the one who has got now the obligation annexed to the ownership of the trust property. So this author of the trust will create the trust by way of transferring the property in the name of the trustee, and this trustee can also be the same author of the trust. So A Limited will transfer the property to A Limited only. However, in case of the transferor, he is in the capacity of the owner of the property. By way of a transfer, he is in the capacity of a trustee of the property. The moment you become a trustee, you are no more personally, you cannot use the property for your personal uses. You can only use it for the benefit of beneficiaries. What is the concept of beneficiary? Beneficiary is the one who would enjoy the end result of the trust, who would enjoy the fruits of the trust, the monies which are invested from the trust property, the revenue which is generated from the trust property shall stand in the benefit of the beneficiary. So that is very important, right? So there is a trust deed, there is a trust property, there is a trustee, there is the author of the trust. This trustee and author can be the same persons or different persons, right? So along with this, we have something called as an object, which is shall be lawful, and such object can be two. One, it can be for the private benefit of the close members, very closed and identifiable members. Then we call it as a private trust. Similarly, it can be for the benefit of public at large. Then we call it as a public trust, right? So all these aspects come under the ambit of a trust deed, right? So there is a transfer of a property. So in the trust deed itself, we will register a trust deed because it's a non-testamentary document, and any trust deed where an immovable property is involved shall be registered, right? And such trust deed shall contain, number one, intention to create the trust, the purpose of the trust, who are the beneficiaries, who is the trustee, what is the trust property, and unless the author is himself a trustee. So if the author is a trustee, it's fine. If not, the transfer of ownership, legal ownership of the property to the trustee. So trust deed itself should say that this trust property shall not transfer to the trustee in the capacity of being a trustee. Correct? But where the author and the trustee are both one and the same, then it will be by way of a mere declaration itself. It will be declared that so and so trustee will be. So now from now on, I shall be the trustee of the property rather than the owner of the property. That will be a declaration. If both the author of the trust as well as the trustee are one and the same. But where a trustee is a different person per se, in such case, the legal transfer of ownership from the author to the trustee shall be clearly documented in the trust deed. And then finally, the duties, rights and liabilities of the trustee, of the beneficiary, of the settlor, everyone has to be looked into. Correct? So this is the concept of a trust deed. Now, so we have seen both those concepts, public and private trust, and registration of a trust deed. So the registration is mandatory only in case of an immovable property which is involved. In case of a movable property, simple declaration itself will create a trust. So there is no need of a registration per se. Now coming to a revocation of a trust, so this is very tricky. So when you want to revoke a trust, so you have created a trust. Now every activity is started and now you want to revoke it. Can it happen? Yes, it can happen. However, by default, it cannot happen. It can happen, but still by default, you should remember that the rule is it cannot be revoked. But it can still be revoked in the following situations: when all the beneficiaries have given their consent. Okay, we are fine. Revoke it. Where a power of revocation has been reserved in the deed, so such power of revocation, even though beneficiaries have given their consent, such power of revocation should still be containing in the deed, that is the trust deed. And then if such trust has been formed purely for the purpose of payment of debts, then before it has been communicated to the creditors. So for this point, let me give you a very brief example. So let us say A has got 3 creditors, B, C, D. Now A thought, okay, let me do one thing. Let me transfer all my property to a trust. Let me put E as the trustee. Let E divide all these funds to B, C, D and give the any balance to B, A. So in this case, the beneficiaries are B, C and D. However, this formation has not been communicated to the creditors. So in such a case, before it is communicated, then you can revoke. Fine. So this is the conditions where you can revoke a trust. Now, when will trust get extinguished? So extinguishing is the end of the trust. Revocation is you taking back the trust in the middle of it, but as trust in the middle of the period or at any point of time. But extinguishment is that the trust is deemed to be ended. It is done with. So first, when the purpose is fulfilled, suppose my purpose is only for the purpose, the purpose of the trust is only, let us say, the construction of a school. The school is constructed, so the trust, there is no need of a trust anymore, so it will be extinguished. Second, when the purpose becomes unlawful, let us say it is for mining. Now, all of a sudden, government said mining is illegal in this so area. So now you can no more go for mining there, correct? So the trust is gone. You cannot have a trust anymore there. Next, when the fulfillment of its purpose becomes impossible by destruction of the trust property or otherwise. You know, it's self-explanatory. When the property itself is destroyed, there is no more a trust, because trust is existing merely because of the trust property. And where the trust is being revocable is expressly revoked. So where a trust is revoked, also it amounts to a end of the trust deed. It's a full stop. Hence, even that is one of the grounds of an extinguishment. So these are the various grounds of extinguishment of a trust. So with this, we had a detailed discussion on this chapter. Thank you.